Welcome back to the Onyx Report's Black Masculinist News feed. I hope you're well. Um, let's get it on. Now, this is a combination of a few different articles, and it really just kind of made me ask a question, right? First article that really inspired much of this hit me in a different way, right? And basically, it's you can find this one on filtermag.org, right? And it's entitled "Study: Police Violence Steals Millennia from Black Men's Lives." Okay, so it reads: a terror imposed on Black, Indigenous, and other communities by the police is hard to quantify. Some measure it by the sheer number of people killed, while others seek to evaluate the subjective and psychological toll. A new study by sociologist Elizabeth Wrigley Field from Minneapolis, Minnesota, ground zero for the 2020 uprisings, has offered another framework: the number of lifetime years stolen from people killed in police encounters. Right? The results are staggering. For every 100,000 presumably cisgender Black men, approaching 4 millennia of their collective lifetimes, compared with life expectancies, 3,772 years, are taken by police officers' use of force. That represents an average of approximately 14 days of life lost per Black man across population. That mind-boggling time span expands to well over 5 millennia lost, 5,696 years per 100,000, when considering all Black men's deaths during police encounters, not just those involving force, but also including causes like suicide and traffic accidents. The figure was calculated from a previous estimation that presumably cisgender Black men face a lifetime 1 in 1,000 risk of being killed by police violence in their lifetimes. Each year, about 56,000 years of life are taken by police encounters in general, found a previous study. The scale of death suffered by Black men is the highest of any racial gendered group. Black men's cumulative loss of life to police violence is 2.5 times that of white men, who lost approximately 1,500 years per 100,000 population. The equivalent figures for Native and Latino men were over 2,000, while Asian and Pacific Islander men had the lowest cumulative loss of life, below 1,000. Right? And if we look at this chart the article produces, you can see a little bit more of that. Right? I love finding data that that assesses gender and race. Gives us a chance to really see what's going on beyond the surface of just using race or just using gender. Right? So here, what we're looking at is this question of police force and associated deaths, right? So you can see officer in the orange, officer force only, and in the green, all police associated deaths. And on the left, you have men, on the right, you have women. So obviously on the left, you see Black men have the largest all police associated deaths and the largest bar for officer force only, right? On both counts. You see them in the majority. And this is on a scale that leads to a maximum of 6,000, right? But if we go to the right side, we see women, and it looks on the surface like they're comparable, right? And you can see Black women have the highest rate of all police associated deaths for women, but actually it's Native American women that have the highest officer force only rates, right, for women. But notice the bottom of the scale, right? The bottom of the scale only goes to 600, whereas for the men's scale it goes to 6,000. So if you actually calculated these scales on an equal footing, what you'd find is that the men's scale, most particularly Black men's numbers, would be far off the chart in terms of how it relates to women. So what we're looking at here is that, as the article points out, and shout out to Elizabeth Wrigley Field for being accurate, she didn't say just Black, lost time. She talked about Black men because she looked at the data, which a lot of people don't do. So they're comfortable using ambiguous terms like, how this affects Black people, or how this. No, she got straight to the point, and even assessed, their sexual orientation, presumably cisgender, most of the time, which statistically is true. So here, this article asking about police violence and how much time it steals. Again, the title is "Police Violence Steals Millennia from Black Men's Lives." Real talk. So shout out to her for this piece. Shout out to what is this? I think it's filtermag.org. But as I said, this piece got me thinking. If police violence steals millennia from black men's lives, what about intimate partner violence? What does that take? Right? And the degree to which, on top of this question of violence, the degree to which women's violence against men is ignored. Even in our media, it's not really regarded to any great extent, right? So let's see what I mean. So here, we got a story of two girls who kill a store manager, right? Kill a store manager who happens to be the husband and father to a family.
You don't know what you did, young lady. Do you understand me? You don't know what you did. And I wish I could get to you to hang you in here today. To hang you, because that's what you need.
Anderson remained emotionless.
I want to get her. Yes, I do, Your Honor. I want to get her. You just don't know how I want to get you. You don't know how I want to get you.
Patricia returned to her seat, letting out one final cry before leaving the courtroom. All Anderson had to say to the court after seeing this grief-stricken widow:
people make mistakes, and your mistakes don't define who you are as a person.
Anderson and her accomplice, Ebony McEwen Ross, casually walked into the O'Reilly store back in November of 2017 before pulling a gun on the store's cashiers. James Haller came from the back of the store and yelled, "Hey!" That's when Anderson fired a single shot, hitting the retired war vet in the head. Although Anderson showed little emotion, McEwen Ross addressed the court in tears.
I never meant for anybody to get hurt, and I know it doesn't mean much, but I am sorry.
Even with all the hurt and pain this family has been through, some family members found it in them to forgive.
My dad was not perfect, and he had his own demons, but he had been forgiven, so I extend that same forgiveness to you, ladies.
Now, aside from the fact that I was offended, by the daughter in this particular story, right? Who not only, forgives the killers outright, but takes this moment to talk about her father's demons. What in the hell does that have to do with the fact that the man was killed for nothing? Or that the women who killed him showed no remorse in court? Right? That was ridiculous. But beyond that, again, it made me ask the question, where does this violence go, and how does it further impact black male lives? Especially when it's not regarded. And if we're just now asking the question of how much time black men lose due to police violence, I'm just curious, how then does it affect other types of violence? Or here. There we go. This here is an interesting story, right? You can find this particular story on WRAL.com, right? And it's entitled "Breakup Ends and Deaths of Chapel Hill's Firefighter Ex-Girlfriend Young Girl," right? This is in Raleigh, North Carolina. A soured relationship between a Chapel Hill firefighter and a woman he used to date has ended in 3 deaths. Raleigh police responded to a home in the 8,000 block of Marsh Hollow Drive at about noon Tuesday and found 48-year-old Larry Donald Donnie Morrison dead. Right? Investigators haven't released the cause of death. Notice that's going around a lot lately. But evidence in the home prompted them to ask Wendell police to check a home in the 400 block of North Cypress Street. There, police found 48-year-old Veronica Brooks and a 9-year-old girl dead. Raleigh police said Brooks was the suspect in Morrissey's death, a 2010 Toyota 4Runner that police said was stolen from Morrissey at the time of his death was found outside Brooks's home. Morrissey had broken up with Brooks, but she wouldn't leave him alone, according to his older sister, Chanel Morrissey. Brooks, a nurse who owned a home health care company, would repeatedly call and text him and sometimes followed him so they would show up at the same location, Chanel Morrissey said. "We tried to tell him then, you need to probably get a restraining order on her, because we don't know what can happen. You don't know what she's capable of doing. Next thing we know, this is what happened." Chanel Morrissey, who lives in Fayetteville, excuse me if I mispronounced that, said the family hadn't heard from her brother since the weekend, noting he didn't respond to calls or texts and didn't answer the door when their aunt and uncle stopped by his house. Okay. The family also checked with the Chapel Hill Fire Department, where Donnie Morrissey had worked since 2006, and found that he hadn't checked in for several days. She said, "I'm starting to freak out. I'm like, okay, something's not right. This is not like my brother, not to call or respond to any of our text messages." The aunt and uncle went by the house again Tuesday and called 911 after no one answered the door, prompting authorities to break in, where they found Donnie Morrison dead. So basically, it looks like this jilted ex may have killed him, took his car, went home, likely killed herself and her child. At least that's what it's looking like. I haven't seen anything beyond this story, but again, what does this do? What do these kinds of things do to black men's quality of life, and how much time does it take off? Now, obviously, for Morrissey, it ended his life altogether, but still. And how much worse does it get when these stories aren't talked about? Yeah. Let's look at another. All right. This one is in Vegas. You can find this on news3lv.com, right? And it's entitled "Arrest Report Details Allegations Against Woman Accused of Hitting and Killing Boyfriend." This is a trippy one. You'll find this interesting. An arrest report details the allegations against a woman accused of hitting and killing her boyfriend with their car in Henderson this week. Henderson police said Wednesday that Danica Kane was arrested on suspicion of murder, alleging she fabricated a story about a man trying to carjack her boyfriend and hitting him with a car on Tuesday near M Resort. In the arrest report, police say they spoke to Kane about what led to her boyfriend's death. Kane said they had been dating for 2 years and moved to Las Vegas Valley from Louisiana about 3 weeks ago. Kane told police they were running errands Tuesday when they came across a homeless man, and the boyfriend gave him a couple of dollars. They spotted the same man hitching later and gave him a ride. At some point during their drive, Kane said the boyfriend admitted to cheating on her several times. So they took in a hitchhiker, and then he admitted to cheating on his girl to her in the car. That's what she's saying. She claimed the news didn't faze her, but her boyfriend became upset and pulled over. So he admitted to cheating, she didn't care, he became upset. Sound realistic to you? Right. They both got out of the car to talk, she said, but the man they picked up got behind the wheel of their car and ran over the victim. Kane said she called 911 and checked on her boyfriend, and when she returned to the car, the man was gone. So a homeless man that was hitchhiking, while they got out of the car to talk, jumped in the driver's seat, hit the man with the car, and then disappeared. Right? Okay. The brother alleged Kane had killed the victim. Let me see. Detectives say they had just after they arrived on the scene, a man came to them saying he was the victim's brother and had another brother on the phone. The brother alleged Kane had killed the victim, saying the two were only dating for about 3 months and had a volatile relationship during that time. He said he witnessed them getting into arguments when they were staying with him. The brother on the phone told police Kane is bipolar and violent, and he suspected she had injured the victim once before. Police say they spoke with a witness who saw a car stopped on the side of Las Vegas Boulevard with a man and a woman in some type of disagreement. The witness said nobody else was in or near the car. Now, what else you find in the article is that when police investigated the car, the back seat was so packed up with stuff that there was no way a person could fit back there. So they began to suspect her, and she's currently in custody. Again, this is all alleging that she killed her boyfriend. She basically ran him over after he admitted to infidelity after 3 months of them being together. Black men are considered property, so we can understand why she would be upset, and even why others would justify her initiating violence against him because of said infidelity. And yes, I mean that literally. I've heard, from women in comment sections routinely arguing that as long as he had cheated on a woman, he kind of deserved what was coming. I've heard this repeatedly, and y'all know I report on this stuff every week. And that's a constant refrain that I keep hearing, most particularly from women. But so again, question comes up. Not only just in terms of death, but how does this affect black men's quality of life? How many years are lost just from the stress of this? But we can even factor in homicide, right? How many years are taken off of black men's lives collectively due to unacknowledged intimate partner violence, right? But we got another. Now this one is an older piece. I hadn't run across it before. I want to say this was 2019, this article. But you can find this one on lohud.com, lohud.com apparently. And it's entitled, Wife Who Set Up Peekskill Cabbie Slaying Gets 15 Years to Life. Right? A Peekskill woman who set up the murder of her husband, a popular local cabbie, then testified against her lover, the man who pulled the trigger, was sentenced Tuesday to 15 years of life in state prison. Now understand something. What we're talking about here is proxy violence. She got one man to kill her husband. Now, as long as these cases don't get found out, this just goes down as one man killing another, right? It doesn't associate with the woman at all. So when we look at numbers of, intimate partner homicides, or it's not even labeled intimate partner homicides, it's just labeled murder, right? The cabbie, the husband, just murdered. It's not classified as intimate partner homicide, and she's not considered a murderer in most cases, as long as she's not found out. So this obscures the numbers on how often this happens. But anyway, Beatrice Camper, 62, was sentenced by Judge Barbara G. Zambelli as part of a deal in which she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in the 2012 shooting death of Terry Camper, 53. She was, she's about 9 years older than him. Interesting. She took out 2 life insurance policies on her husband before her lover, ex-con John Murray, shot him twice in the back of the head in his cab. A jury convicted Murray, 62, of first-degree murder, April 17th. He faces life without parole at his sentencing Tuesday. Beatrice was married to the well-known cab driver in Peekskill, but having an affair with Murray, who was also married and living in Newburgh. After setting up her husband's murder, she played the grieving widow, even calling him her soulmate. Peekskill detectives found her linked to the ex-con when they searched her apartment and discovered a trove of letters Murray had sent her from prison. She testified at Murray's trial that she helped him determine where her husband would be the afternoon of October 3rd, 2012, on Pine Street in Peekskill. Murray called for a cab, climbed in the back, and shot him in the head. Right. Now this is interesting, because it's these kind of cases that people don't really know what to do with, and we don't really talk about them as often as we should, right? And they kind of get swept under the rug. But again, she solicited an ex who she was still seeing, even though he was married, and she was married, to kill her husband for a life insurance policy. Now, this is something that Warren Farrell talks about in his book, Myth of Male Power. And he talks about the ways in which poor women will use sex, and women with means will use money to basically pay assassins to eliminate husbands, mostly for insurance. I mean, insurance fraud seems to be pretty high. And he talks about that being one of the primary motivations. But again, unless they actually find out who did it, it's not labeled as an intimate partner homicide. So the numbers for male victims of intimate partner homicide tend to be lower, by and large. They tend to be lower. But when you talk about the black community, the numbers are not as distant from women's deaths as you would think. I posted this on a previous show, but at the end of the day, on a given year, and this is just ballpark, you may have anywhere from 150 to 230 black women that have been killed by their partners. And on average, you might find it anywhere from 150 to 210 odd black men who die, right? Every year due to intimate partner homicide. So the range is, on a given year, you may have 200 women, you'll have 175 black men. Not as distant as one might think for something like intimate partner homicide. But again, this is over a population of 43 million. So as a colleague of mine once said, and I've said this before, you're more than likely to be, struck by lightning or die in a flood than you are to be killed by your intimate partner. So this trope that black men kill their partners in mass that I've heard people say in social media is absolutely ridiculous. But to the extent that we do see the numbers statistically, again, against 43 million as a total population of black folk, it's pretty even between deaths caused by black men to their wives and by black women to their husbands. Despite that, the numbers are still a little low for men, because these kind of cases are generally not added to the discussion. not in terms of the data and not in terms of the casual conversation. But I go back to the initial question that I asked when I opened this piece, starting with, this question of how many years police violence takes off of black men's lives. I want to add the question, how much time does domestic violence and homicide take off of black men's lives? Because when you look at the number of homicides, they're fairly close on an annual basis. The number of black male homicides due to an intimate partner, they're fairly close to the numbers of black men killed by police officers. Contemplate that one. Peace.